Every day we see more tents under bridges, more families living out of cars. And while the problems seem insurmountable, the solutions are simpler than you think. We share the real stories and the real solutions of homelessness, what works, what doesn't, and how communities like ours can do better. I'm Baron King, and this is Give Me Shelter. Welcome to Give Me Shelter. This podcast is designed to support factual and responsible conversations regarding our American homeless crisis. I've created 24 topics that we're going to cover in this next year that dive in deep to the causes and progressive solutions to homelessness. In this first episode, I've decided to tackle the issue of housing. And housing really lies at the core of this homeless crisis that we're talking about. It goes back about 20 years, and so we're going to dive in with a little bit of history on the subject and then start talking about different factors that weave its way into our housing situation and how that ends up exacerbating our homeless crisis. So, welcome to How Did We Get Here? Housing 101. If you haven't already, please hit subscribe on your device. We'd love to catch you on the next upcoming episodes. We have a lot of good stuff planned. So I'm going to take you back to 2007. From 2007 to 2017, we had fairly low and descending homeless numbers. And the reason for that is the inception of HUD's Permanent Supportive Housing Program. HUD invested resources into finding ways to get people housing vouchers and secure housing and accommodations for our most vulnerable homeless Americans. And so we had a fairly stable, even descending trend through 2017. The numbers remained relatively stable, hovering around 550,000 Americans, which still is a big number, but much less than what we're seeing today. Now, something happened in 2007. You probably remember that. That was the housing crisis. And so here's what happened. The subprime mortgage bubble burst, and the nation faced huge numbers of foreclosures. People were losing their homes. Some of these were second and third homes, but we saw a big contraction in the housing market. So following 2007, when we get into 2008, 2009, there is a glut of vacant homes. And so people that were purchasing homes, they had plenty to choose from. Prices were low, mortgage rates were low, but the demand for new housing starts evaporated. Think about this. If we have a glut of housing on the market, there's not a whole lot of need or demand to build new houses. And so we saw a precipitous drop of new housing starts in 2008, 2009, 2010. Now, with that, if I'm a housing contractor and there's no demand, I still need to find work. And a lot of residential construction companies that were operating prior to 2007 either went out of business, moved into other areas, or started working in trades outside of the residential housing market. And so that started a period where there was this big retraction of investment in building housing stock. Gradually, supply and demand started to meet again. And now we're at a place where the demand for housing since about 2014 has increased over the ability to build housing stock. Now, here's something interesting. The number of residential contractors that are operating today in 2025 is 50% less than what existed in 2007. That's a big reduction. And so we have less contractors, we have less carpenters, we have less people in the residential trade operating, and they are not currently producing a housing stock that is significant enough. Now, it's not just the building of houses. Here's something else that happened. Following this reduction in home building, municipalities saw a steep reduction in the number of permits being applied for to build projects. And so most municipalities started to adjust their long-term infrastructure plans. Maybe they had a new sewer plant that was on the books to be completed in the next 5 years. Maybe there were some roads that they wanted to build or water lines. All of that was pushed off because if we're not building new homes, we don't have to keep up with the pace of infrastructure. So, what we're facing now is a backlog of infrastructure problems and not being able to build at the pace to currently satisfy the number of homes we have. So currently, our homeless numbers are around 770,000 Americans, about 25 to 30% higher than it was just 10 years ago. That's a big number. So, what is the definition of homelessness? I'm going to read it to you here. Homelessness is generally defined as lacking fixed and regular, adequate nighttime residence. This can include living on the streets, in shelters, or in places not meant for human habitation, such as cars, abandoned buildings. People that are living in a residence that is not theirs, not under their control, maybe couch surfing, staying with relatives. Those folks are also considered displaced or homeless. And then we also have, as you know, tent communities that have popped up throughout the entire United States where people have tried to find some level of safety and security by popping up a tent community in areas that could be in the woods, could be under a bridge. That's what you know. So 770,000 people homeless. Now, let's not stop there. There's a second tier of concern that probably people don't think about. We have 70% of all extremely low income families that are paying more than half of their income to rent. That's what we call rent burdened. Actually, if you're spending more than 30% of your rent or your income on rent, that is considered rent burdened. Why is that a problem? Well, if I'm paying a significant portion of my income in rent, I may not have money for healthcare, for utilities, for adequate food, for doctor's visits, car maintenance, and all those types of things. And so we not only have 770,000 Americans living unsheltered and homeless, we have this second tier of people that are at significant danger of falling into homelessness. Say I'm paying 40% of my income in rent, and then my landlord says to me, hey, I have no choice, but I'm increasing the rent $200, $300 a month. That's going to put me at risk for prevention. Now, at the Chat Foundation, we just completed an 18-month project where we were doing eviction prevention. We worked with a state grant, and we spent $1.6 million of state-funded money to keep people that were falling behind in rent in their homes. That's a good thing, right? It stops the flow of people into homelessness. And when we started doing this, we were writing checks of, $1,000, $2,000 to the landlord to make them whole. The landlord would agree to keep that tenant in place, and we would keep a family in place. In that 18 months, we kept 280 families intact in their homes, and we felt pretty good about that. But over the course of 18 months, I started noticing that the size of the checks were getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And that was a concern to me. So I asked our chief program officers, do a little digging into the statistics. And what I wanted to find out was, of these families that we are helping, how many of them are rent burdened? Because at Chat Foundation, we don't want to just keep a Band-Aid over the problem. We want to move people on a path to self-sufficiency. And if they're struggling currently with the rent, I wanted to know about it. The results of that analysis were shocking. We found that 85% of the people that we were helping with eviction prevention were living rent burdened. And so we adopted a policy of trying to provide some help with fiscal responsibility to try and explain what rent burdened is and try and help them locate domiciles that fall within their economic range. Unfortunately, most of the respondents that we talked to said, we've been looking for a cheaper place on the market and just can't find it. And so that is really at the core of this problem, is that housing is expensive, it's insufficient, and a growing number of Americans are finding it hard just to make their monthly payments. Okay, so what that means is we are short approximately 7 million rooftops. We have a housing shortage. Now, I've heard different people in this industry say that we don't have a shortage of houses. There's plenty of houses. And that can be true and it can be false. And what I mean is, and we're going to put up this slide.
If you look at this slide of the United States, the green areas are the areas where there are enough rooftops to meet the demand. The red areas are where there is a housing shortage. So when we say we are short 7 million units, it's in these areas in red.
So yes, there are houses available. There's plenty of housing available in the Rust Belt, but what you don't have is jobs. And so it's yeah, it would be nice to just tell our homeless individuals you need to go where there's housing, but they also need employment too. And so we have to build where people are at. This is really the ugly truth of the supply and demand curve. So, as supply is low and demand is high, prices go up. If supply is high and demand is even or declining, prices stay in the equilibrium or they decline. And right now, there is high demand and low supply, and that is driving up our costs. Here in Chattanooga, I've been living here almost 4 years, and I have seen our costs get really, really high. It's interesting. In the state of Tennessee, for every 100 people that leave Tennessee, 133 come in. And the two states that are supplying the most domestic migration into the state are California and New York. Okay, so in this topic of homelessness, if you've followed it at all, you've probably heard the term affordable housing. And usually when I go to conferences, everybody kind of says the same thing. Well, what is affordable housing? It's different for everybody. Affordable housing means that the price that you're paying on rent or your mortgage is within a reasonable range of your other expenses. And what we're saying is no more than 25% of your monthly income should go to your rent or your mortgage payment. So if I'm making a high wage, I can spend more. If I'm making a low wage, I need to be careful and I need to spend less. So let's talk about this from a consumer's perspective. For a family making a combined income of $200,000 a year, an affordable rent or mortgage would be anything up to $5,000 a month. Now, that's a pretty sizable mortgage payment, but the numbers make it work. They would still have money for food, car repair, car maintenance, health care, all those other things. But for a family of two wage earners making $10 an hour, and that's not a lot, but it's still above federal minimum wage. That number would only be about $1,040 per month. Now that's a fairly difficult number to fit into. Here in Chattanooga, a two-bedroom apartment is going to start around $1,500 and go up from there. And so what that means is it's going to be very, very difficult for that low-wage earning family to exist outside of a rent-burdened scenario. Now, what leads to those factors? Well, first of all, cost of living has been a pretty significant problem. We've had inflation over the last 15 to 20 years, and the cost of living has actually increased 55% since 2007. Now, we have to talk about the other side of the equation. What has the wage increase been like in the United States? Because if we're seeing our costs go up 55%, hopefully our income is keeping pace. Unfortunately, in the United States, from 2007 to 2025, real wages only rose by 11.9%. And these are from the Bureau of Labor Statistics that we get these numbers from. And so what we're seeing is a divergence where we have this sharp angle of cost of living and we see a much lower increase in wage. And the longer that goes on, the greater the gap goes. We've also seen technology play a part in this equation. How's that work? Well, rapid technological advances really started in the mid 2010 time, and what we've seen is it's caused a lot of labor jobs to disappear. Last time I was in a Walmart, I was surprised that every single checkout line was self-checkout. There were no cashiers in place. And so technology is taking away some jobs, and it tends to take away a lot of jobs at that lower threshold for income. But that's not the only industry that's been affected. We have manufacturing jobs that are being replaced by automation. We have a lot of retail and customer service jobs that are being replaced. Admin and office support is being replaced by technology. AI is expected to remove a significant number of labor jobs. Factory workers, data entry clerks, bank tellers being replaced by ATMs. We're seeing a lot of jobs being squeezed. Now, companies do this to remain profitable, but the people that pay the price are the people working in those industries. And if you're working in those industries, these are low threshold entry industries, which means you don't need a high education, a degree to get into those. You can get into those fairly easily. And when you remove those jobs, then what's left are jobs that have a higher threshold for entry, maybe a degree, maybe an advanced degree or technical training. Another factor that we have to talk about is HUD support. So, HUD is the federal government agency that provides assistance to those that are struggling to remain housed or to get housed. And that works by them providing money into geographic areas through housing vouchers. So perhaps I'm making $400 a week and I just can't make rent work. I can apply for a voucher, and that voucher will cover some or all of my costs of rent. It is a burden on the taxpayer. It's not my favorite system, but it's the only system that's out there. And right now, it is doing its best to keep people housed. But we're seeing a progressive reduction in HUD awards year after year. And with the new administration in 2025, we're expecting to see a precipitous drop, maybe 40% reduction in those numbers. And so, for those people that are living on housing voucher subsidies, we are very nervous here at the Chat Foundation that we're going to see a lot more people enter into homelessness because that support is key to a lot of people. Now, I've heard the arguments that a lot of taxpayers don't want to supplement people's rent. Why should I pay for somebody else's rent? I get that. It's not an ideal situation. But keep in mind, we have a lot of people that are struggling with physical disabilities, mental issues, um, substance abuse issues, and providing housing and safety and security is the best way to then transition those people into treatment or into rehab or into places that can address those issues. And so cutting the cord with housing, putting more people on the street is going to exacerbate our problem. Okay, let's back up a little bit. We've talked about what's happened from 2007 to 2025. I want to talk about what's happened in the last 5 years because it's really, really interesting. We have been averaging nationally since 2007 to 2023 about an 8 to 9% increase per year in homelessness. But something very interesting happened in 2024 when the numbers were released. From the federal government, we were told that we had now an 18% increase in homelessness. On top of that, there was a very concerning segment of that population, which was family homelessness. That jumped to 39% over the previous year. So, not good. There was one category that actually showed a significant reduction in homelessness, and that was veteran homelessness. So, why is that? Well, a number of years ago, HUD partnered with the Veterans Administration to create a program called HUD VASH. And HUD VASH was a coordinated effort that was going to prioritize supportive services to veterans experiencing homelessness. We saw a 9% decrease in veteran homelessness in 2024, all the while the other numbers were skyrocketing. What this tells me is it is possible to make really significant gains in homelessness reduction when we have a well thought out strategic plan. We've been writing our representatives and our senators and encouraging them to give a second thought to some of the cuts that they have said are coming down the pike. But the cuts that are coming this year are really concerning. We have HUD staff is being reduced, and their funding is anticipated to be reduced at 40%. That is a huge, huge cut. We are also concerned about Medicaid cuts. A lot of the folks that the Chat Foundation supports in our housing programs are on Medicaid, and that is their only source of medical care. And so removing that safety net is going to increase their costs and make it less likely for them to get the important care that they rely on. SNAP, what is SNAP? It's food stamps. And a number of the folks that we serve, that we have in our housing developments, rely on supplemental food support. They just don't have enough food to go around. And so, with the reduction of SNAP and Medicaid, that's going to also impact the people we serve. We've heard that the VA has cut about 20% of the positions in the Veterans Administration. And I know that the veterans that we serve already are frustrated with lag times and the lack of resources that come their way. By cutting VA support even more, it's going to be problematic. And then Department of Agriculture. Why is that important? The Department of Agriculture supports area food banks. Our Chattanooga Regional Food Bank has already reported significant food shortages. That's already hitting our area. And what I would say is, we serve the homeless community and those that are living right on the threshold of homelessness. And I would say that just about every person we serve relies on one or more, maybe all five of these services. And so I'm really concerned. We're not building enough homes. We're not building at the cost that's necessary. We're not building um, for the dynamics of homelessness. Now, this is what's really interesting. In Chattanooga, you can find a two-bedroom, you can find a three-bedroom. You're going to pay probably marketplace rate, which is out of range for most people. But here's the interesting thing. For the people that have registered for housing vouchers in Hamilton County, where we live, 72% of those people that have applied for a homeless voucher identify as a single individual. So if I am lucky enough to win the voucher lottery and I get a voucher, but all I can find is a two-bedroom or three-bedroom apartment, and I'm a single individual, that voucher is no good to me. And so what doesn't exist in our community and a lot of communities throughout the United States is dwellings that are the appropriate size and scope for the people that need it most. And so what we're advocating locally here and statewide is that we really put our heads together and think, how can we create these blocks of efficiency or one bedrooms? Maybe 6 or 8 units that could exist on a single lot size. Not these sprawling apartment complexes, but sprinkled throughout the community. It would fall in line with mixed income strategies, which have been proven to be very important for upward mobility for those that are suffering with low wages. And so it's not only the cost of the dwelling, but it's also the size and the scope of the dwelling that's really important. All right. So what's needed? I think that we need a top-down federal, state, and local campaign to build affordable housing, to build enough units to stem the tide. How many units? Well, the federal government suggests that we need 7 million rooftops in addition to what we currently have that would just stabilize the housing market. So we have to build. Let's face it, folks. If there's not enough houses now, there's not going to be more next year unless we change our strategies. And in a sense, while there's a lot of factors that play into homelessness, housing stock, housing supply is the most critical factor. We need to build our way out of this program. There have been some really good things that have happened in the last 2 years. Here in the state of Tennessee, in 2024, the state legislature repealed a number of prohibitions that blocked the development of high-density, low-income housing. Originally, these laws came on the books because Tennessee just wanted to keep Tennessee nice and didn't want to build high-density, low-income housing. Well, they realized over a number of years that this was resulting in homelessness. And so this repeal of these prohibitions allows state or allows municipalities and local governments to then build at a higher density, which allows for construction companies to build more economically, more affordably, and we can get more people at the lower socioeconomic strata housed. Our city in Chattanooga responded a couple months later by rezoning the city. And so we are hoping that that really attracts a lot of development into this area. Also, there are a number of programs such as LIHTC credits where contractors can get additional tax benefits, or land developers can get tax benefits by building affordable housing. And so there are tools in the toolbox, there are pieces in place, but I would love to see our representatives get even more creative and say, how can we incentivize this? I mean, let's face it, folks, we want to put people to work. We want to increase construction. We want to increase infrastructure. And the cities and the counties and the state all benefit by increasing the tax base. So this is a no-brainer. Another thing I would love to see is bringing back more progressive, supportive housing solutions. There used to be a program that operated up until about 15 years ago called transitional housing. Now, transitional housing is kind of a generic term, but this was a program called transitional housing, and it worked through HUD. And the way it worked is an organization like Chat Foundation would have properties, maybe apartment buildings or houses, and you would sign somebody struggling with homelessness to a 2-year lease, and you would pair them with a case manager that would help assist them with making decisions and improving their lifestyle. And the goal was that they would sign a 2-year lease, and their rent was based on their ability to pay. And so we would charge them a rent that was no more than 28% of their monthly income. So if they could pay, let's say the cost of the unit was $750 a month, and they could pay $400 a month, that the federal government would pay in the difference. So would pay in that difference between $750 and $400 to the landlord. That would be us, and we would keep that person in there. Now, here's the way the plan was designed was really, really cool. At the end of 2 years, if the tenant kept current with their payments and cooperated with case management, when they left their lease, when they left the apartment, they would get 75% of what they paid into the program back as a lump sum. When we ran this, we had a partnership with Habitat for Humanity, and this resulted in 80% home ownership. And so the reason I like this program is it reduces the burden on the taxpayer. It also gives support, but it gives a limited support. We're not paying into perpetuity somebody else's cost of living. We're saying, hey, we're going to give you assistance for 2 years. And when you get to that 2-year point, you're going to have enough money to either pay for your deposit for your new apartment, maybe a down payment, maybe even start your home ownership journey. And so I would love to see us get back to that program. Right now, HUD only has one program, permanent supportive housing. It's good for some people. It's not good for everybody. For every problem, if you only have one tool, it's going to be limited in its effectiveness. So I would love to see more support like that. Okay. So I hope you've enjoyed this topic. If you want to dig deeper onto this topic, I can recommend a book called Homelessness is a Housing Problem. It's available on Amazon or wherever you get your books. It's by Clayton Aldham and Greg Coburn. It's a good read. I'd recommend that. And also, if you have questions or ideas for topics that you'd like to cover, please send those questions or suggestions to info@chatfoundation.org. We'd love to get those. We'd love to make you a part of this show as we go forward. Our next episode I'm really excited about. We're going to be talking about the lenses that we use to view homelessness. It talks about how we view homelessness, what is our understanding of homelessness, and how our understanding of homelessness impacts the potential solutions. Thanks for listening to Give Me Shelter. If you made it this far in the episode, I invite you to share it with at least one person today, because change happens one conversation at a time. I'm Baron King. We'll see you next time.